Dust billows behind Wade, the Callahan sisters flanking him like avenging angels. They ride straight for the Frontier Bank, 6 hired guns waiting like vultures. This land's been ours for generations, Ruby thinks, the scent of saddle leather sharp in the air. The gunslingers don't know what's coming. They don't know about Clarabelle's secret. The closer he got, the more signs of life he saw. A vegetable garden flourished near the house. Chickens pecked at the ground inside a wire pen. Fresh tire tracks marked the dirt path leading to the front porch. The front door opened before he could dismount. A woman stepped out, her dark hair pulled back and her hands resting on her hips. She was beautiful, but her expression held no welcome. Behind her, 2 more women appeared in the doorway, equally striking and equally unwelcoming. "You're on private property," the first woman called out, her voice carrying across the yard with unmistakable authority. Wade held up the deed. "Ma'am, I think there's been some confusion. I bought this place fair and square from Frontier Bank 3 days ago. Got the papers right here." The woman's eyes narrowed. "Is that so?" She stepped down from the porch, her sisters flanking her. "Well, I'm Ruby Callahan, and this here is my family's land. Has been for 20 years. 20 years? WDE's voice cracked slightly. "The bank told me it had been abandoned for over a decade, said the previous owners just up and left." Ruby stopped 10ft from his horse, close enough that he could see the fire in her green eyes. "The bank told you a lot of things, didn't they? But here's what they didn't tell you. We never left. We never sold. And we sure as hell didn't abandon our home." The younger sister, a blonde with worried eyes, whispered something to Ruby. The middle sister, a red head with a sharp gaze, kept her hand near something tucked in her belt. WDE's mind raced. He had spent every dollar he owned on this property. The deed was legitimate. He had checked it twice at the courthouse, but these women clearly believed they belonged here, and they didn't look like squatters passing through. "Look, ladies," he said, trying to keep his voice steady, "I don't want any trouble, but I have a legal document that says this farm belongs to me now. Maybe we can sort this out peaceful-like." Ruby's laugh held no humor. "Peaceful? You ride onto our land with a piece of paper and expect us to just pack up and leave?" She gestured toward the house. "You see that garden? Those repairs on the roof, the new corral behind the barn. We've been living here, working this land, keeping it alive while some bank office sat empty in town." WDE felt sweat forming on his forehead, despite the cool morning air. Something was very wrong here, and he was starting to suspect he might be the one who had been deceived. But before he could respond, Ruby pulled a folded document from her pocket. "Because we've got papers too, stranger, and ours are a whole lot older than yours." Ruby unfolded her document with deliberate slowness, her eyes never leaving WDE's face. The paper was yellowed with age, its edges worn from handling. She held it up for him to see, and even from horseback, Wade could make out an official seal at the bottom. "This here's the original deed to this property," Ruby said, her voice cutting through the morning air like a blade. "Signed over to our father, Thomas Callahan, in 1851. That makes it 24 years old. Mister, how old did you say your paper was?" Wade's stomach dropped. His deed was dated just 3 days ago, but that didn't make sense. You couldn't sell property that already belonged to someone else unless his thoughts raced to the bank manager's nervous fidgeting the way the man had rushed through the paperwork, insisting on cash payment only. "That's impossible," Wade said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Frontier Bank wouldn't sell me stolen property. They're a legitimate business." The middle sister stepped forward, her red hair catching the sunlight. "Legitimate?" She laughed bitterly. "That's Sadie Quinn," Ruby said, nodding toward her sister. "And she's got some interesting stories about how legitimate that bank really is." Sade's eyes blazed with anger. "You want to know about legitimate? 3 months ago, a man from that same bank came out here claiming we owed back taxes, said if we didn't pay, they'd foreclose. But we showed him this same deed, proved we owned the land free and clear. No taxes owed on property that was never mortgaged." The youngest sister, who had remained silent until now, spoke up in a voice barely above a whisper. "That's Clarabelle," Ruby explained, "and she saw something that day that might interest you." Clarabelle's hands trembled as she spoke. "After the bankman left, I followed him partway to town. He stopped at Miller's trading post and met with another man. They were laughing about something, and I heard the bankman say, "Give it 3 months and we'll have buyers lined up for that property." Wade felt like the ground was shifting beneath him. "You're saying the bank planned to sell your land, even though you proved you owned it?" "We're saying a lot more than that," Ruby replied. "We're saying you're not the first man they brought out here with a fancy deed and a sad story." The words hit Wade like a physical blow. "Not the first?" Sadie nodded grimly. 2 weeks ago, a family from back east showed up with papers, just like yours. Said they'd bought the place sight unseen. We sent them packing, but they mentioned something that made our blood run cold. Wade dismounted slowly, his legs unsteady. What did they say? Ruby and her sisters exchanged a look that spoke of shared secrets and deep fear. When Ruby finally answered, her voice was barely above a whisper. They said the bank told them the previous owners had died in a fire. All 3 sisters burned alive in their sleep. WDE's blood turned to ice. He was looking at 3 women who were supposed to be dead. WDE stared at the 3 women standing before him, very much alive and very much angry. The pieces of a terrible puzzle were falling into place in his mind, each one more disturbing than the last. "They told people you were dead," he said slowly, his voice with disbelief. "But here you are living on your own land, and they're selling it out from under you to anyone with cash." Ruby nodded grimly. "Now you're starting to understand. Question is, what are you going to do about it?" Wade ran a hand through his hair, trying to think clearly. "I gave them everything I had, $500 for this place. If your deed is legitimate, then I've been robbed just as much as you have." "More than you think," Clarabelle said quietly. "Show him, Sadie." Sadie disappeared into the house and returned moments later with a leather satchel. She pulled out several papers and spread them on the porch railing. "These are copies of deeds we found blowing around town after that windstorm last month. 5 different properties, all sold by Frontier Bank in the past 6 months, all to different buyers." Wade examined the documents. The signatures looked identical, the same flourishing handwriting on each deed, but the properties described were scattered across 3 counties, and the dates of sale overlapped impossibly. "They sold the Morrison Ranch to 3 different families in the same week," Sadie continued. "The old Henderson place has been sold 5 times since spring. Same pattern everywhere. Cash only, no inspections, buyers encouraged to take possession immediately." "It's a confidence scheme," Wade realized, his anger building. "They're taking money from people like me while stealing land from people like you. When the buyers show up and find the properties occupied, what happens?" Ruby's expression darkened. "Most folks turn around and leave rather than fight. They figure they got swindled and chalk it up to bad luck. The bank keeps their money, keeps the land, and starts the cycle over again." "But some buyers don't give up so easy," Clarabelle added. "Some try to force us out. That's when things get dangerous." Wade felt sick. "How many people have they done this to?" "More than you'd think," Sadie replied. "And it's getting worse. The bank's gotten bold lately, selling the same properties over and over. They're making a fortune off of lies and forged papers." A cloud of dust on the horizon caught WDE's attention. A rider was approaching fast, and something about the urgency of his pace made WDE's stomach clench. "Expecting company?" he asked. Ruby followed his gaze, and her face went pale. "That's Jed Collins. Rides for the bank. He only comes out here when there's trouble brewing." The rider was close enough now that they could see his face, grim and determined. He pulled up hard in front of the house, his horse altered with sweat. "Miss Callahan," Jed called out, not bothering to dismount. "Bank manager needs to see you in town today. Says it's about your property taxes." Ruby's hands clenched into fists. "We don't owe any taxes." Jed's smile was cold and predatory. "Bank says different. Says you got till sundown to pay up or you forfeit the land." Wade realized this was no coincidence. The bank knew he was here. Wade stepped protectively between Jed and the sisters, his hand instinctively moving toward his gun belt. Something about the timing of this visit felt like a trap being sprung. "Funny thing about that," Wade said, his voice steady despite the tension coiling in his chest. "I just bought this property from your bank 3 days ago. Seems strange they'd be collecting taxes on land they don't own anymore." Jed's confident expression faltered for just a moment before recovering. "You must be mistaken, friend. This here's Callahan property, and it's been delinquent on taxes for months. Is that so? WDE pulled his own deed from his coat pocket. Then why does this paper say I own it now? Signed by your bank manager himself. The color drained from Jed's face as he stared at the document. We could practically see the man's mind racing, trying to figure out how to handle this unexpected complication. There's been some kind of error, Jed stammered. I'll need to take this up with Mr. Harrison at the bank. Ruby stepped forward, her original deed still in her hand. While you're at it, ask Mr. Harrison to explain how he can sell property that already belongs to us. This deed's been in our family for 24 years. Jed's horse stamped nervously, sensing the tension. The rider's eyes darted between WDE's gun and the three women, clearly calculating his odds. Look, I'm just following orders. The bank wants its money by sundown, or there will be consequences. What kind of consequences? Sadie demanded, her hand moving to rest on something tucked in her belt. The kind that happen when people don't pay their debts, Jed replied, his voice taking on a menacing tone. Sheriff's been real understanding about property disputes lately, especially when it comes to squatters refusing to leave rightfully purchased land. Wade felt his anger boiling over. Squatters? These women have been living here for 20 years, and I've got papers saying I bought this place fair and square. Seems to me your bank's been playing fast and loose with the truth. Jed's hand moved toward his gun, but Wade was faster, not drawing, just shifting his stance in a way that made his intentions clear. The message was received. I'd think real careful about your next move, Wade said quietly, because right now you're outnumbered 4-1, and we've all got legitimate grievances against your employer. Clarabelle spoke up unexpectedly, her soft voice cutting through the tension. Jed, you've known us since we were children. You really think we'd squat on someone else's land? For a moment, uncertainty flickered across Jed's features, but it was quickly replaced by something harder, more desperate. I got my orders, he said finally, and if you don't have that tax money by sundown, the sheriff's coming out here with papers to clear you off this property. All of you. He wheeled his horse around and spurred it toward town, leaving a cloud of dust and unspoken threats hanging in the air. Wade watched him disappear over the ridge, his mind already working on their next move. How much are they claiming you owe? Ruby's answer made his blood run cold. $200, by tonight. $200. WDE stared at the horizon where Jed had disappeared, his mind racing through possibilities. That was nearly half of what he had paid for the property. Money he no longer possessed. We don't have that kind of cash, Ruby said flatly, reading his thoughts. Never have. We grow our food, make our clothes, trade what we can in town. But $200 might as well be $2,000. Sadie kicked at the dirt with her boot. Even if we did have it, paying would just prove their fake claim is real. Next month, they'd want more. Wade nodded grimly, and they'd keep bleeding you dry until you had nothing left to give. Then they'd take the land anyway. He paused, studying the three women who had become his unexpected allies. How well do you know the people in town? Well enough, Clarabelle answered. Most folks have been decent to us over the years, but when it comes to going against the bank, she trailed off with a shrug. The bank holds mortgages on half the businesses in town, Ruby explained. People are scared to cross them, and Sheriff Morrison owes his job to their backing in last year's election. Wade felt the walls closing in around them, but something about this whole situation still bothered him. Jed seemed awfully nervous when I showed him my deed, like he wasn't expecting me to be here. What are you thinking? Sadie asked. I'm thinking maybe we can use that nervousness against them. Wade untied his horse and swung into the saddle. I'm riding to town to have a conversation with Mr. Harrison at the bank. Ruby grabbed his horse's bridle. That's exactly what they want. Get you alone away from witnesses. Men have disappeared for crossing Frontier Bank before. Then come with me, Wade said simply. All of you. Let's see how brave Mr. Harrison feels when he has to explain his paperwork in front of the whole town. The sisters exchanged glances. Clarabelle spoke first. It's risky. If this goes wrong, if we do nothing, you lose your home tonight anyway, Wade pointed out. At least this way, we go down fighting. Ruby released the bridle and stepped back. Give us 5 minutes to saddle up. While the women prepared their horses, Wade studied his deed more carefully. Something about the ink looked fresh, too fresh, and the paper, while aged-looking, felt wrong somehow, like it had been artificially weathered. Sadie emerged from the barn, leading a spirited chestnut mare. You found something? Maybe. Wade held up the document to the light. This ink's barely dry. And look here at the signature. He pointed to the bank manager's name. The ink's a different shade than the rest of the document. Clarabelle mounted her horse gracefully. They made your deed fresh, but tried to make it look old, which means they're not as organized as they want us to think, Ruby added, settling into her saddle. Mistakes like that suggest they're working fast. Maybe too fast. Wade folded the deed carefully and tucked it back into his coat. Or they're getting desperate. Question is, why the rush? The four riders started toward town at a steady pace, but Wade couldn't shake the feeling that they were riding into a carefully prepared trap. Still, staying put would only delay the inevitable. As they crested the hill overlooking the town, Wade pulled up short. Something was wrong. Too many horses at the bank, he said quietly. Below them, the main street looked normal enough, but at least 6 horses stood tied outside Frontier Bank. Far too many for regular business on a weekday afternoon. Ruby's face had gone pale. They were expecting us. Wade studied the scene below through narrowed eyes. 6 horses meant 6 men, and men didn't gather at a bank in the middle of the afternoon unless trouble was brewing. We should turn back, Clarabelle whispered, her voice tight with fear. No, Ruby said firmly. If we run now, they'll hunt us down anyway. At least this way we choose the ground. Wade counted the horses again. Those are riding horses, not town horses. Someone brought in hired guns. Sadie pointed toward the general store. Look there, Mrs. Patterson's closing up shop early, and see how empty the street is. Word's gotten around that something's about to happen. They were right. The main street, which should have been busy with afternoon trade, was nearly deserted. Shopkeepers had pulled their shutters closed and the few people visible were hurrying along with their heads down, avoiding eye contact. They're clearing the area. Wade realized, this isn't just about collecting taxes. They want us gone permanently. As they watched, a familiar figure emerge from the bank. Sheriff Morrison, his badge glinting in the afternoon sun. But he wasn't alone. 3 men followed him out, their hands resting casually on their gun belts. Professional gunfighters, Wade realized with a chill. The sheriff's in their pocket, Ruby said bitterly. Just like we thought. One of the gunfighters pointed up the hill toward their position. Wade cursed under his breath. They'd been spotted. Time to go, he said, but Ruby grabbed his arm. Wait, look who else is coming out. A tall man in an expensive suit stepped onto the bank's porch. Even from a distance, Wade could see the man's air of authority the way the others deferred to him. That's not Harrison, Sadie said. I've never seen him before. Clarabelle's face had gone white. I have. That's the man I saw meeting with the bank agent 3 months ago, the one who was laughing about selling our property. Wade felt pieces clicking together in his mind. This operation's bigger than just one small-town bank. They've got backing from somewhere else. The stranger in the suit was gesturing toward the hill, giving orders to the sheriff and his hired guns. Whatever he was saying, it made the men spread out, taking positions that would block all the main routes out of town. They're not planning to arrest us, Wade said grimly. They're planning to corner us. Ruby's hand moved to a rifle. Then we don't give them the chance. But as they turned to retreat, Wade spotted movement on the ridge behind them. 2 more riders were approaching from the north, cutting off their escape route. The trap was closing from both sides. We're surrounded, Clarabelle said, her voice barely audible. Wade quickly surveyed their options. To the east lay rough country, too dangerous for horses in daylight. To the west, open ground that would leave them exposed. Their only real choice was straight ahead through town, past the very people trying to kill them. There's another way, Ruby said suddenly, following his gaze. The old mining trail behind the church. It's narrow, but it leads to the canyon, if we can reach it. A gunshot cracked across the valley, echoing off the hills. One of the riders behind them was signaling the men in town. WDE's decision was made. We ride hard, straight through the main street. Stay low, stay together, and don't stop for anything. But as they spurred their horses forward, Wade realized they weren't just riding into a gunfight. They were riding into an execution. Wade spurred his horse forward, the other three riders close behind him. They thundered down the hill toward the main street, hooves pounding against the hard-packed earth. The men outside the bank scrambled for position, but Wade had counted on their surprise at such a direct assault. "Stay right behind me!" he shouted over his shoulder as they hit the edge of town. The first gunshot rang out from the bank's porch, the bullet whistling past WDE's ear. He leaned low over his horse's neck, drawing his own weapon. The sheriff and his hired guns were spreading out across the street, trying to create a crossfire, but they hadn't expected the riders to come straight at them. Ruby's rifle cracked behind him, and one of the gunfighters stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder. The precision of her shot sent the others diving for cover behind water troughs and porch posts. They raced past the general store, past the blacksmith shop, hooves striking sparks off the wooden boards of the main street. Wade could see the church ahead and beyond it, the narrow trail Ruby had mentioned. But the man in the expensive suit was shouting orders, and more men were emerging from buildings along the street. This wasn't just the sheriff and a few hired guns. The entire town seemed to be in on the conspiracy. A shot from an upstairs window shattered the wooden sign above the saloon. Clarabelle's horse shied violently, nearly throwing her, but she managed to stay in the saddle. The trail. Ruby pointed toward a gap between the church and the old mill. Wade veered right, leading them off the main street just as a concentrated volley of gunfire erupted behind them. Wood splintered and dust flew, but they were already past the worst of it. The trail was narrow, barely wide enough for a single horse. They rode in file now, Wade in the lead, climbing steadily into the rocky hills above town. Behind them, he could hear shouting and the sound of horses being saddled for pursuit. After 10 minutes of hard climbing, Wade called a halt in a grove of pine trees. They were far enough from town to risk a brief rest, and the horses needed it. "Everyone all right?" he asked, checking each of them for injuries. Sadie had a graze on her arm where a bullet had clipped her, but it was superficial. The others were shaken, but unharmed. "They'll be coming after us," Ruby said, looking back toward town. "And they know this country as well as we do." Wade nodded grimly. Running would only delay the inevitable. They needed to end this. But how could 4 people fight an entire corrupt organization? That's when Clarabelle pulled something from her saddlebag that changed everything. "Before we left the house," she said quietly, "I grabbed something I thought we might need." She held up a thick envelope sealed with red wax. "These are the real bank records, the ones Mr. Harrison thought he burned last month." WDE stared at the envelope. "How did you get those?" Clarabelle's smile was small but determined. "Sometimes being the quiet one means people don't notice when you're listening at windows." Wade broke the seal on the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside were dozens of documents, real deeds, forged deeds, correspondence between the bank and mysterious investors from back east. And most damning of all, a ledger showing payments to Sheriff Morrison and several other town officials. "This is everything," he breathed, scanning the papers. "Names, dates, amounts. They've been stealing property across 3 counties for over 2 years." Ruby looked over his shoulder at the ledger. "Look at this entry here. Payment to Judge Stevens for favorable rulings. And this one, Sheriff Morrison. Monthly retainer for protection services." Sadie pointed to another page. "They've got a list of properties they plan to steal next. The Hendersons spread the old Murphy place, even the church land." The sound of approaching horses interrupted their examination. Wade quickly stuffed the papers back into the envelope. "How many pursuit routes are there from town?" 3 main trails, Clarabelle answered. "But only one leads to the territorial capital," WDE's mind raced. They could keep running, but these documents needed to reach honest authorities. And the territorial marshal's office was only a day's hard ride north. "We split up," he decided. "Ruby, you take these documents and ride for the capital. Find Marshal Davidson. I met him last year. He's honest. Sadie and Clarabelle, you know hiding places in these hills better than anyone. Keep them chasing shadows until Ruby gets back with help." "What about you?" Ruby asked. Wade checked his ammunition. "I'm going back to town." Someone had a direct conversation with the man in the expensive suit. The plan was desperate, but it worked. While the hired guns chased false trails through the canyon, Wade slipped back into town through the cemetery. Most of the population was still hiding indoors, afraid of the violence that had erupted. He found the stranger from back east in the bank, frantically packing papers into a leather case. The man looked up in shock as Wade stepped through the rear door. "Going somewhere?" Wade asked, his gun trained on the man's chest. The stranger's composure cracked. "You don't understand the forces you're dealing with, cowboy. This operation has backing from very powerful people." "Had backing," Wade corrected, past tense. "Because right now Marshall Davidson is reading documents that name every one of your investors, every official you've bought, and every property you've stolen." The color drained from the man's face. "That's impossible. We destroyed all the records, all except the ones Clarabelle saved," Wade said with grim satisfaction. Within hours, everything unraveled. Marshall Davidson arrived with federal agents and arrest warrants. The man in the expensive suit, revealed to be Jonathan Kessler, a land speculator from Chicago, was arrested along with Sheriff Morrison, bank manager Harrison, and 6 others. The forged deeds were declared invalid. The stolen money was recovered from hidden accounts. Victims who had been swindled were compensated from seized assets. Wade got his $500 back, plus damages. More importantly, the Callahan sisters' ownership of their family land was officially confirmed and recorded with the territorial government. 3 months later, Wade stood on the porch of the farmhouse he now shared with Ruby Callahan and her sisters. Not as owner, but as family. He had invested his returned money in expanding their operation, and together they had built something neither could have achieved alone. Ruby emerged from the house, wiping flour from her hands. "Supper's ready?" Wade smiled, watching Sadie training horses in the corral, while Clarabelle tended the garden. It had taken a conspiracy to bring them together, but it was trust and hard work that had made them a family. The land was safe. The criminals were behind bars. And for the first time in years, Wade Langston was truly home. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable tale where destiny and courage collide in ways you never expected. Don't forget to subscribe and consider a super chat to help us keep bringing you more stories like these. Your support means everything to us.